Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are cracking open a file that, honestly, I really didn't think would be this thick.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's quite a stack of notes.
It is, because we are looking at a piece of television history that I think, a lot of people just sort of take for granted. We're going back to the early 90s.
It is so good to be here, and you're right. Taken for granted is really the perfect way to put it, because when something is this massively successful, people tend to think it was easy. But as we're going to see today, it was anything but easy.
Exactly. So for you listening, we are doing a highly granular, really deep look at Season 10 of the legendary American sitcom Cheers.
A monumental season.
Totally. Now, just to orient everyone, this specific season aired on NBC from September 1991 all the way to May 1992. And I have to be completely honest with you. When I saw we were doing Season 10, my very first thought was zombie TV.
Zombie TV. I like that term. What do you mean by that exactly?
You know what I mean? It's that phase in a show's life where it's just, shuffling along. The writers are exhausted, the actors are clearly bored, and they're just recycling the exact same plots because the network keeps backing up a dump truck full of money.
Right.
Usually by Season 10, a show is just dead on its feet.
That is the typical trajectory, absolutely. Usually see the creative peak around Season 3, maybe Season 4. Then you get those sort of maintenance years, and then the slow, really painful decline.
Yeah.
But the data we have here and the source material we're looking at tells a completely different story about Cheers.
That's the first thing that jumped out at me in the production notes. The numbers are just staggering. We're talking about viewerships in the 20 to 30 million range every single week.
It was an absolute juggernaut. I mean, to put that in perspective for you today, 30 million viewers is, it just doesn't happen anymore.
No, not at all.
That's a Super Bowl number or a major breaking news event. But for Cheers in 1991, that was just a normal Thursday night.
It's just a Thursday. So our mission today, really, is to figure out how. How do they completely avoid the zombie phase? We're going to explore how they managed this massive ensemble cast, how they navigated the whole Sam and Rebecca dynamic, and how they delivered these iconic guest appearances.
All while maintaining those insane numbers.
Right. And we have the receipts for all of this. We're looking at detailed production notes, cast lists, and episode synopses for the entire season.
And it's really worth noting who was actually driving the bus at this point.
Good point.
Because you still had the original creators at the very top, right? James Burrows and the Charles brothers, Glenn and Les, they were up there under Charles Burrows' Charles Productions in association with Paramount Television. But on the ground, the day-to-day showrunners were different.
Yeah, I was looking at that exact list in our sources. It's not the Charles brothers running the room anymore.
No, it wasn't. For Season 10, the specific showrunners were Cherry Eichen, Bill Steinkellner, and Fief Sutton.
And did that change the vibe of the show? Because usually, when you change the people actually writing the words every week, you inevitably change the voice of the characters.
It definitely did. This team is actually sometimes referred to as a sort of dream team of sitcom writers. They really swung for the fences this year.
Oh, for sure.
They brought a slightly more absurdist, maybe even a darker energy to the show. You see them taking these massive creative risks that a younger, less established show simply wouldn't dare take.
Like a disastrous attempt at baby making.
Exactly. Or an elaborate prank war that somehow involves a sitting U.S. senator. Or, and we are definitely going to get to this later, a look into the future at a main character's actual funeral.
That funeral detail absolutely blew my mind when I read it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this systematically. We really have to start with the central dynamic of the show.
Sam and Rebecca.
Right. Because for years, Cheers was the Sam and Diane show. Then Diane left, Rebecca came in, and we had a few years of Sam just relentlessly trying to conquer Rebecca. But by Season 10, where exactly are Sam Malone and Rebecca Howe? It feels like that whole will they, won't they thing must be getting incredibly stale by 1991.
It was getting stale, and the writers absolutely knew it. So in the season opener, which is an episode called Baby Balk, they decided to just blow up the dynamic completely by accelerating it to the absolute maximum. They don't just flirt. They don't just casually date. They decide to have a baby together.
A baby. See, this is exactly where my zombie TV alarm bells started ringing when I first read the synopsis.
Because of the trope?
Yes. The let's have a baby plot is usually the ultimate Cousin Oliver moment in television.
Yeah.
It's usually this desperate Hail Mary pass to add cuteness to a show when you've clearly run out of jokes.
In almost any other show, yes, that's exactly what it is. But here is the pure brilliance of that Season 10 writing room. They didn't introduce the concept of a baby to bring the characters closer together or to make things heartwarming.
No, they didn't.
They used the idea of a baby to expose exactly why these two specific people should never, ever be together.
So it's essentially the anti-sitcom baby arc.
Precisely. Look at how they set it up. They decide they want to have a baby. Do they have a romantic candlelight dinner to celebrate? No.
Right.
They immediately go to Frasier and Lilith for parenting advice.
Which, if you know those characters, is mistake number one.
Right. If you want encouragement for a happy, carefree family life, you do not go to the Cranes.
The source notes specifically mention that their advice immediately kills the mood. And that feels very intentional from the writers. It's like the show is actively contrasting the impulsive, let's just do it attitude of the bar managers with the neurotic, hyper-intellectual reality of the Cranes.
That's a great observation. The Cranes serve as a sort of ghost of Christmas future for Sam and Rebecca. They are what happens when you intellectualize a relationship but completely lack natural warmth.
Right.
And the show doesn't just stop with them talking about it. They don't let them off the hook. They force them to actually test drive the idea of parenthood.
Oh, you're talking about the Unplanned Parenthood test.
Yes. The episode where they agree to babysit Carla Tortelli's children.
Now, for anyone listening who maybe hasn't watched the show in a while or hasn't seen the early seasons, we really need to clarify something. Carla's children are not normal children.
No, they are not. They are essentially feral beings.
It's the ultimate stress test. I mean, if you can survive a single night alone with the Tortelli brood, you can probably survive anything life throws at you.
And naturally, it is a complete, unmitigated disaster. But the important takeaway here from a writing perspective isn't just the slapstick comedy. It isn't just Sam getting hit with food or Rebecca screaming in frustration.
Right. It's about the aftermath.
The important thing is the emotional fallout, because in a lesser show, they would have survived the chaotic night, looked at a sleeping child at the end of the episode, and said something like, "Aw, it's all worth it."
Exactly. The soft piano music plays, the studio audience says, "Aw," and they decide to keep trying for a kid.
Cheers completely refuses to do that. It shows them deeply overwhelmed, genuinely frightened, and actively questioning their own competence as adults. It uses the comedy to drive a permanent wedge between them. And that leads directly to the conceptual future episode.
The episode called Go Make. This one really fascinated me in the production notes. It sounds so claustrophobic.
It really is. It's what people in the industry call a bottle episode.
I hear that term thrown around a lot. Can we define that for the listener who might not be a huge TV production nerd?
Sure thing. A bottle episode is usually something done for budgetary reasons. You use just one set, usually the main one, and only the core cast members. No expensive guest stars, no location shoots. It saves the production money.
Okay, that makes sense.
But creatively, it acts as a pressure cooker. It forces the writers to rely entirely on dialogue and character psychology because you can't rely on action sequences or constant scene changes to keep the audience entertained.
So in Go Make, Sam and Rebecca are just stuck together where
They are spending the night together, specifically trying to conceive this baby. But instead of it being sexy or romantic in any way, they just get completely stuck in their own heads.
it's called overthinking the whole thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
They start deeply imagining the future. And this is where the show gets really conceptual. They actually play out these hypothetical scenarios of what their potential child would be like. They ask, what if the kid is exactly like Sam? What if the kid is exactly like Rebecca?
And reading the notes, neither of those options sounds particularly great. I mean, a mini Sam is basically a tiny womanizer, and a mini Rebecca is a complete neurotic mess.
Exactly. And through this imaginative play, which is really just them projecting their own deep-seated insecurities onto a non-existent child, they come to a massive realization.
They ultimately decide not to do it.
They decide against having a child together. And this is a truly massive moment for the entire series. Just think about the overall trajectory of the show. Season 6, 7, 8, 9, it was all, will they finally get together? Then season 10 starts with, will they have a family? And the final answer is a hard, undeniable no.
It's surprisingly mature for a network sitcom.
It is. It shifts the entire dynamic from romantic tension to fundamental incompatibility. It takes a lot of bravery for a writing staff to look at their two highly bankable lead characters and say, actually, you two would be terrible parents together, and you really shouldn't do this.
It honestly saves the show from becoming just another standard domestic comedy. Because if they had a baby, the show basically just becomes Full House set in a Boston bar.
And absolutely nobody wants to see that.
Nobody. So they dodged the baby bullet. But this season has this really strong underlying theme running through it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Based on the sources, it feels like there's this constant tension between growing up and growing old. And Sam seems to be fighting the growing old part incredibly hard.
That is the perfect thematic lens to look at the season through. Sam Malone is fighting a completely losing battle against time. And that brings us directly to the sperm count saga.
This is episode 11, titled, I'm Okay, You're Defective. Which, by the way, that title alone is just brutal.
It is brutal, and it's a critical breakdown of Sam's entire character. You have to remember, Sam Malone's entire identity, his complete sense of self-worth is built on his virility.
Right.
He's the former pro baseball player. He's the ultimate ladies' man. He is Mayday Malone.
So if his plumbing doesn't work, who is he?
That is the exact existential crisis the writers force him into. He is anxiously bracing for news from a fertility doctor. He is absolutely terrified that he might be the defective one in the equation. And to really ramp up the thematic tension, the B plot of the episode features Frasier actively writing his last will and testament.
That is such a stark contrast. So you have Sam dealing with the potential creation of life, and at the exact same time, Frasier is dealing with the absolute certainty of death.
Cheers was always masterful at that specific kind of tonal balance. But here is where the episode gets really interesting. Sam finally gets the envelope from the doctor with the test results, and what does he actually do?
He burns it. He literally sets the envelope on fire.
He consciously chooses ignorance. He decides in that moment that the myth of Sam Malone is vastly more important to him than the reality of his own physical health. It is a moment of extreme, almost childish vanity, but also deep vulnerability. He's just too scared to know the truth.
But the writers, they don't just let him off the hook there, do they? This is the part of the production notes that I honestly had to reread 3 times to make sure I was seeing it right. The flash forward.
Yes, this is undoubtedly one of the most unique narrative devices used in the entire 11-year run of the show.
Describe exactly what happens for the listener.
So Sam burns the envelope in the bar. We fade out, but then we fade back in. And the on-screen caption tells us we are suddenly many, many decades in the future.
So we are completely leaving the early 90s.
We are leaving the 20th century entirely. The scene opens, and we are at a funeral. Specifically, we are at Frasier Crane's funeral.
Wait, let's just pause right there. We actually see the death of Frasier Crane. Because considering Frasier went on to have his own incredibly successful spin-off show for another 11 years, and then a whole reboot in the 2020s, this is kind of a massive continuity nightmare, isn't it?
It absolutely is if you take it completely literally. But you have to remember, in 1991, they had no idea Frasier would basically live forever on television. So they show us his funeral. We see an elderly Lilith. We see an elderly Sam.
And the lawyer is standing there reading the will.
Right. The lawyer opens an envelope that everyone assumes is Frasier's last testament. But instead, it turns out to be the medical results that Sam thought he had burned back in 1991.
He burned the wrong envelope. That is such a classic farce setup.
It really is. But the payoff isn't just slapstick comedy. The lawyer reads the results out loud to everyone, and it turns out Sam's sperm count was, quote, perfectly average.
Perfectly average, wow.
Not Superman, not defective, just average. And for a total narcissist like Sam Malone, that is the ultimate insult. He isn't biologically special, he's just a regular guy.
And Lilith's reaction to all of this happening at her husband's funeral.
She delivers arguably the best line of the season. She just looks around at the absolute chaos unfolding, and she sighs and says, that damn bar.
That damn bar. You know, when you think about it, that feels really heavy. It's played for a laugh, but it's incredibly heavy.
It is heavy. Because it implies that the bar isn't just a fun place where they all hang out and work. It's a trap. It's this emotional black hole.
Yeah.
It implies that this specific dynamic, Sam, the gang, the bar itself, outlasts their marriages, their other careers, and eventually even their lives. They are all just trapped in Cheers forever.
That is, wow. I never really thought of Cheers as a sort of purgatory before, but that reading really sells it. So Sam is dealing with the absolute horror of being average. Meanwhile, the notes show that Rebecca is dealing with her own independent struggles, mostly a spiraling sense of self-worth.
Rebecca's entire arc in Season 10 is really about the massive gap between who she desperately wants to be and who she actually is. She wants to be seen as this high-powered, ruthless corporate killer, but in reality, she's a total mess.
We definitely see this in the episode License to Hill.
Right. In that episode, she tries to impress Sam by taking total authoritative control of the bar. She wants to prove once and for all that she's the responsible one in the room. But in her absolute hubris, she accidentally lets the bar's liquor license expire.
Which, if you run a bar, is basically the single most important thing you cannot do.
It's the only thing that actually matters. So, because of her mistake, they have to serve non-alcoholic drinks covertly to the customers. It's a classic sitcom farce, everybody running around trying to hide the crime, but it really underlines Rebecca's constant state of failure.
Yeah.
She tries so incredibly hard, but she always ends up tripping over her own feet.
And then there's her love life, or I guess lack thereof. We definitely have to talk about the episode Rebecca's Lover.
Yeah. Oh, that is a standout episode, mostly because of the incredible guest star they brought in.
The source material highlights Harvey Fierstein.
The legendary Harvey Fierstein. He plays Mark, who is Rebecca's old high school flame.
And Rebecca, just being classic Rebecca, thinks this is finally it. She thinks this is her big second chance at true love.
She is completely and utterly oblivious. She doesn't realize for a second that Mark is gay. She is aggressively pursuing him, just throwing herself at him, completely convinced that he's her destined soulmate.
What's interesting is, usually in a network sitcom from 1991, the big reveal that a character is gay would be played purely for a cheap laugh. You know, just a big shock reaction from the studio audience.
Exactly. The gay panic trope was everywhere back then, but Cheers handles it with surprising tenderness. When the penny finally drops for Rebecca, she isn't angry at him. She's just profoundly sad. And Mark is incredibly kind and gentle with her.
The synopsis mentions a specific scene where they just cuddle together.
It's a genuinely beautiful scene. They just sit there on the couch, cuddling and commiserating about how incredibly difficult relationships with men are.
Wow.
It totally pivots from being this goofy farce about a misunderstanding into a really poignant moment about adult loneliness. It shows the audience that Rebecca isn't just a cartoon character. She's a deeply lonely person who is just desperate for real connection.
And that specific balance, that manic, crazy energy versus the deep underlying sadness, is exactly what Kirstie Alley was so brilliant at playing.
She was an absolute master of that specific tragic comic tone. No one did it better.
Okay, so if Sam's theme is growing old and Rebecca's theme is basically spinning her wheels, we really need someone in the show who is actually growing up. And surprisingly, according to the notes, that person is Woody Boyd.
It is Woody. Season 10 is arguably the Woody season.
Yeah.
He is the one core character who is actively moving his life forward in a meaningful way.
He's on the road to the altar with his girlfriend, Kelly.
Right. Woody, the incredibly simple farm boy from Hanover, Indiana, and Kelly, the astronomically wealthy, totally oblivious socialite. It's the classic class divide romance trope.
But the writers throw some pretty significant obstacles in his way this season, like Henri.
Ah, Henri, the suave French photographer. He was specifically introduced to be a romantic rival, a foil for Woody. In the episode Fine French Wine, Henri's visa is expiring, and he actively tries to marry Kelly just so he can stay in the country. It completely threatens Woody's own proposal plans.
But reading through this, Henri is really just a plot obstacle. The real foundational obstacle between them is the money, the massive class difference.
That's the real theme they're exploring. Look at the episode Rich Man, Wood Man. Woody and Kelly come back to Boston from a lavish vacation in London, and Woody has noticeably changed.
He's gotten a real taste of the good life.
He has. He's suddenly wearing these fancy clothes. He's insufferably dropping names left and right, and the rest of the gang at the bar has to actively work to bring him back to earth. It's a really interesting dynamic shift because usually Woody is the most grounded, humble person in the room. Seeing him suddenly get a big head creates this really fun friction with the rest of the ensemble.
But the show is careful to show he's not just a gold digger, right? He genuinely loves her. And he really proves it in the episode No Rest for the Woody.
Oh, this is easily one of the funniest visual episodes of the entire season. Woody desperately needs money to pay for a proper engagement ring for Kelly, so he takes on a grueling second job.
As a gravedigger.
Yes, a gravedigger. We are really leaning heavily into the death themes this season.
We really are. Between Frasier's will, the funeral flash forward, and now digging graves. It's everywhere.
So Woody is working nights in a cemetery, physically digging holes in the ground. He is completely exhausted, he's covered in filth, and the primary conflict is that he has to formally meet Kelly's intimidating grandmother, who is played by the amazing Celeste Holm.
So he's desperately trying to be presentable and charming for this high society matriarch, while literally smelling like an open grave.
It is physical comedy gold. Woody Harrelson is just so incredibly good at playing bone-tired exhaustion. But beneath the comedy, it really emphasizes his deep devotion to Kelly. He is willing to literally dig ditches in the middle of the night just to be worthy of marrying her.
And all of this careful buildup leads directly to the massive season finale, an old-fashioned wedding.
The double-length season closer.
And looking at the reception data provided in the sources, this wasn't just a television episode, this was a cultural event.
It truly was. We have to look at the raw ratings here. This single episode drew nearly 33 million viewers. Specifically, 32.9 million.
32.9 million people tuned in at the exact same time.
That is nearly a third of the entire television viewing population of the country. It was by far the highest rated episode of the season.
Wow.
It just completely proves that the audience was deeply emotionally invested in Woody's happiness. Over the course of 10 years, he had basically become the lovable little brother to the entire American viewing public.
And the wedding itself, did they actually give him the perfect fairy tale ending?
Of course not. It's Cheers. It was absolute, unmitigated chaos. Carla predicts early on that it's going to be a disaster, and she's entirely right. You had angry mobsters hiding in the kitchen. You had a very confused German translator causing massive communication issues. You even had a dead minister again with the death motif.
It is a serious recurring motif this year.
But despite all the farce and the disaster, the wedding actually happens. Woody grows up. He officially becomes a husband.
Right.
While Sam is still just standing behind the bar serving beers, his former protege, Woody, has completely surpassed him in major life milestones.
That's a really sharp contrast. The young apprentice completely outgrowing the older mentor.
Exactly.
Now, we absolutely cannot talk about Season 10 without dedicating some time to the Cranes. Frasier and Lilith, they're such a dominant power couple on the show, but this season, the writers really start peeling back the layers of Frasier's past. And we suddenly find out he wasn't always this stuffy, buttoned-up psychiatrist.
No, he wasn't. This is really where we get into expanding the deep lore of Frasier Crane. The episode one hugs, the other doesn't, drops an absolute bombshell on the audience.
The famous Nanny Gee episode.
Yes. Nanny Gee is this wildly famous children's singer in the universe of the show. Think of someone like Raffi, but vastly more intense and theatrical. She comes to Boston to perform a concert for their son Frederick's birthday, and she is played by none other than Emma Thompson.
You're just casually racking up the Academy Award winners in this cast list. Emma Thompson playing a manic children's singer.
It is a total tour de force performance from her. She is incredibly manic. She's hilarious. She commands the room. But the plot reveal is the real kicker here. It turns out Nanny Gee isn't just some random performer Frasier hired out of the phone book. She's actually Frasier's first wife.
His first wife. So Frasier was fully married to someone else before Lilith.
He was. Back in his early medical school days, he had this brief, wild, bohemian marriage to this exact woman. And in classic conflict-avoidant Frasier fashion, he somehow just forgot to mention this tiny little detail to Lilith.
Oh, Frasier. That is an absolute death wish. You do not hide major life secrets from Lilith Sternin.
It predictably results in a spectacular physical catfight between the two women. But beyond the slapstick comedy of the fight, this episode is structurally crucial because it completely expands the character of Frasier.
How so?
It shows us that he actually had a rich, complex life. Long before he ever walked into the bar, he had a wild side. He has secrets.
It really sets the narrative stage for his own spin-off later on, doesn't it? It proves he has enough depth.
It absolutely does. It proves to the network and the audience that Frasier Crane can easily carry a complex story that is completely separate from Sam or the rest of the bar patrons.
The sources also mention another family expansion for Lilith in an episode called Smotherly Love.
Yes, that's the episode where they finally introduce Lilith's overbearing mother during a vow renewal ceremony. Again, just building out the world of the Cranes. And then they also have to deal with Norm as a terrible houseguest in the Norm who came to dinner after he injures his back painting their living room.
Right, right. And speaking of expanding the universe, we definitely have to mention the big network crossover event. In the episode License to Hill, Frasier casually mentions he's taking a trip.
Right. He mentions he's taking a quick flight over to Nantucket. Now, if you were just casually watching Cheers in a vacuum, that's just a totally throwaway line of dialogue. But if you were sitting on your couch watching NBC that specific Thursday night, you knew exactly where he was going.
He was flying directly into the show Wings.
Yes. The episode titled Planes, Trains, and Visiting Cranes aired on Wings that exact same night. Frasier and Lilith physically show up at the airport in Nantucket on the other show.
I love that so much. The early NBC cinematic universe. It makes the fictional world feel so incredibly real. Like you could just get on a plane in the Cheers universe and literally land in the Wings universe.
It was a brilliantly executed marketing strategy by NBC, part of that whole must-see TV branding, but it also deeply rewarded the loyal viewer. It made you feel like you were part of this exclusive club that understood the inside joke.
So we've covered the major romances, the giant weddings, the secret past wives. Now we have to zoom out and talk about the overall texture of the show, the daily bar life. Because Cheers isn't just about the two leads. It's about the entire ensemble. And the notes indicate that Season 10 kept the classic traditions alive, specifically the Bar Wars.
Oh, Bar Wars was the sacred annual tradition, the escalating prank war with their rival, Gary's Old Town Tavern.
It's basically the Super Bowl for the bar regulars.
It really is. And in Season 10, the writers actually give us 2 doses of it. First, there's Bar Wars V, The Final Judgment, which is a Halloween-themed episode where the notes say Sam may have gone a little too far with a prank involving a fake murder.
A fake murder. Again, with the death theme.
I'm telling you, the writers were clearly working through some heavy existential dread that year.
Clearly.
But then, later in the season, we get Bar Wars 6. This time, it's for real. The inciting incident here is that Gary finally sells his bar.
The true end of an era.
Or so they think. The gang immediately decides to intensely haze the new owner, but they realize way too late that the new owner isn't just some random guy off the street. And this whole setup leads to one of the most highly specific political cameos in the show's entire history.
Right. The cameo by Senator John Kerry.
Senator John Kerry, appearing on camera as himself in the pre-credits sequence.
Now, obviously, keeping our neutral hats on here, we are just looking at this as a piece of media history. This is 1991 John Kerry. He is the sitting senator from Massachusetts at the time. He's not a presidential candidate yet, but still, purely from a production standpoint, why him?
It's entirely about grounding the show in its physical setting. You have to remember, Cheers was entirely filmed on a closed soundstage in Los Angeles, California. It wasn't shot in Boston.
Right.
So the producers constantly needed these little authentic touches to remind the audience, hey, don't forget, we are supposed to be in Boston. Having the actual sitting Massachusetts senator walk through the door creates that instant verisimilitude.
It's a lot like when the actual mayor of New York shows up on an episode of Seinfeld. It makes the city itself feel like a living, breathing character in the ensemble.
Exactly. It's geographical shorthand.
And speaking of true Boston institutions, we definitely cannot forget Carla Tortelli. Aside from accurately predicting absolute disaster at Woody's wedding, what is her main arc this season?
She actually has a very weird, almost mystical arc early on in Madame La Carla. Her personal psychic decides to retire and actually selects Carla to formally succeed her as a psychic.
You know, Carla as a psychic actually makes perfect sense to me. She's already deeply suspicious of absolutely everything and everyone.
She definitely has that dark, cynical intuition. But her major ongoing conflict this season is with the upstairs neighbor, John Allen Hill. He's the guy who owns Melville's, the incredibly fancy seafood restaurant located directly above the bar.
And they just absolutely hate each other.
They profoundly despise each other. He's this massive, condescending snob, and she's Carla. In the episode Head Over Hill, she meticulously sets out to completely humiliate him. It's a classic, straightforward revenge setup. But then the writers throw in a massive twist.
Let me guess.
She ends up sleeping with him.
Carla. Sleeping with the enemy.
It is such a great character complication. She hates his guts, but she is undeniably physically attracted to him. It adds this great layer of messy complexity to her character.
Yeah.
It shows the audience that her constant burning anger is very often just a protective mask for intense passion. And the deep, overriding shame she feels about sleeping with him is actually way funnier than the feud itself ever was.
The notes also mention her son going through some major life changes in My Son, the Father.
Yes, her son initially enters the priesthood, which is a big deal for her, but then abruptly pivots his career path to become a male model.
Just a slight career pivot there.
It's just a minor change in direction.
And we also have to touch on Cliff Clavin, the resident bar know-it-all. The notes show he actually has a major brush with greatness this season.
Yes. In the episode, here's Cliffy. Cliff writes a joke, and he becomes utterly and completely convinced that he has successfully sold this joke to The Tonight Show.
The tragic, enduring hope of Cliff Clavin. He always genuinely thinks he is just one single step away from nationwide fame.
He really does. He actually buys plane tickets. He flies all the way to Burbank, California. He goes straight to the studio taping. And this whole plot line gives us a massive cameo from the absolute king of late night himself, Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson appearing on a primetime sitcom. That is a massive deal for 1991.
It was a gargantuan get for the producers. Carson was notoriously private and incredibly picky about his outside appearances. For him to formally agree to appear on Cheers really speaks to the overwhelming cultural dominance of this show at that time.
Yeah.
It was essentially a public tip of the hat from one television legend to another.
It's the undisputed king of late night formally acknowledging the undisputed king of the sitcoms.
Precisely. And Cliff also gets a more grounded storyline in a diminished Rebecca with a suspended Cliff, where he has to deal with deep unhappiness regarding the new United States postal uniforms, which is just such a perfectly mundane Cliff storyline.
Just to quickly round out the pure Boston flavor of the season, the source material highlights an appearance by Kevin McHale from the Boston Celtics.
Yes, in the episode Where Have All the Floorboards Gone, Kevin McHale appears, but critically, he is not shown playing basketball. Instead, he becomes bizarrely obsessed with counting the exact number of bolts in the floorboards of the Boston Garden.
It's such a weirdly specific, trivial obsession for a pro athlete to have.
Which is exactly why it fits so perfectly into the universe of Cheers. Because everyone sitting in that bar is deeply obsessed with something trivial. Kevin McHale fit right into that specific neurotic energy. They also had Harry Connick Jr. guest star as Woody's cousin, who develops a massive crush on Rebecca.
So they were just absolutely packing the season with star power. So we've looked at the major plots, we've looked at the underlying themes, now let's just look at the overall scoreboard one more time. We mentioned earlier that the wedding finale got nearly 33 million viewers. But was the rest of the season genuinely strong, or was that just a finale bump?
It was incredibly consistent from start to finish. If you look at the viewership trends provided in the source material, the season premiere alone had 31.4 million viewers.
Wow.
And even the absolute low points of the season were still pulling in around 22 million.
22 million viewers as a low point. That is just incomprehensible today.
Most regular episodes hovered very comfortably between 24 and 30 million. That kind of rock-solid consistency in a show's 10th year on the air is basically unheard of in television history.
Right.
It fundamentally proves that the writing room was still incredibly sharp, the characters were still naturally evolving, and the American audience still considered these fictional people to be a part of their own family.
So, synthesizing all of this information from our deep dive today, what does this all actually mean? When we look back at the totality of Season 10, it's clear it wasn't just a show lazily treading water.
No, absolutely not. It was a season of massive expansion. They successfully expanded the lore of the world with characters like Nanny Gee and Lilith's mother. They dramatically expanded the emotional range of the leads with the heavy Sam and Rebecca baby arc. They successfully married off Woody.
Yeah.
They were still actively building new rooms onto the house, even as they were slowly getting ready to prominently close the front door in Season 11.
It really emphasizes that village feel we were talking about.
Yeah.
You're not just tuning in every week to see what Sam is up to. You're tuning in for the entire ecosystem of the bar. One week it's a Frasier-heavy episode, the next week it's a Carla episode.
Exactly. And that rotating ecosystem is exactly what kept the format feeling so fresh and kept people coming back year after year.
You know, before we wrap up today, I really want to leave you, the listener, with one final sort of provocative thought to chew on. We talked extensively about that flash-forward scene in episode 11, the one set at Frasier's funeral.
Right. The perfectly average sperm count reveal.
Think about what that scene actually implies for the entire universe of the show. In a sitcom that is so deeply grounded in the present moment, the day-to-day trivial grind of hanging out in a bar, the writers actively chose to show us the literal, definitive end of Frasier Crane's life, just to deliver a punchline about Sam's vanity.
Right.
But if you look beneath the joke, there's something else there. It heavily implies that the core dynamic of Cheers, Sam, Lilith, the regulars, the bar itself, is arguably the single most permanent thing in these characters' lives.
That is a really profound point to make.
Think about it. They get married, the marriages fail, they have big careers, they eventually retire, but the physical bar, the bar's always going to be there. That damn bar, exactly as Lilith says at the funeral, is their anchor in life, but it's also arguably their chain.
It's a beautiful, if maybe a slightly melancholic observation. The place where everybody knows your name ultimately becomes the one place you can never really leave. Even decades later, even in death, they are entirely defined by their relationship to that room.
Exactly. It's a surprisingly haunting little existential note to leave inside a network comedy, but honestly, That kind of depth is exactly what made Cheers such a legendary show in the first place. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We really hope you enjoyed this extensive trip back to 1991.
It was an absolute pleasure to revisit the source material with you.
Next time you're flipping channels and watching old reruns, keep a close eye out for those specific cameos we discussed today. Spot Senator John Kerry, spot Emma Thompson playing Nanny Gee, and just take a moment to appreciate the incredible craft that went into keeping this massive television machine running at absolute full speed right when it should have been running on empty fumes.
Absolutely. Well said.
Thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next Deep Dive.